Shalom, I'm Eddie Chumney of Hebraic Heritage Ministries, and we welcome you to this week's Focus Israel Report. In this week's report, we're going to be sharing with you regarding the current efforts in the UN Security Council to discuss a UN Security Council resolution to recognize a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. And it is as follows. The Palestinian authorities initiated a UN Security Council resolution in December for the UN Security Council to consider a two-state solution based upon the 1967 borders with East Jerusalem as its capital. The measure did not pass. The United States opposed the Palestinian draft, saying that Palestinian statehood can only be achieved through negotiations with Israel and not by an imposed timetable. It has been a long-standing U.S. policy that the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict would be based upon agreement by both sides through direct negotiations. In the past, the United States has vetoed a UN Security Council resolution to recognize a Palestinian state. With Israel expected to form a new government by May the 7th, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is speaking with key members of the UN Security Council to support another effort to eventually recognize a Palestinian state. Recently, the UN's outgoing top Middle East envoy, Robert Siri, challenged the UN Security Council to lead the way on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, saying it should present a framework for talks that may be the only way to preserve the goal of a two-state solution. In response, Palestinian ambassador to the United Nations, Riyad Mansour, said that the Palestinians are ready and willing to see if the UN Security Council has the political will to adopt a resolution with a deadline for ending Israel's presence in the West Bank and establishing a Palestinian state. Mansour said that the adoption of a UN resolution with a timetable would be one of the most effective measures to combat extremism in our region, because extremists receive their fuel from the injustice of the Palestinian people. Mansour added, "If there is a just solution to this conflict in a short period of time, then you'll take away from them the main source of recruitment and mobilization," he said, adding that it would also contribute to resolving perhaps 70% of the burning issues in the Middle East. In addition, the Palestinians also won an international conference on the issue that would include the 5 members of the UN Security Council which have veto power, that is, the United States, Russia, China, Britain, and France, as well as concerned Arab parties, Mansour said. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said that the success of a renewed effort to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN Security Council would be complicated, and it has its obstacles. Abbas said, "This renewed effort will be very difficult because the United States can use its veto rights in the UN Security Council. In any case," he said, that the ball is now in the United States in Israel's court. Recently, the Arab League foreign ministers decided to support a new Palestinian UN Security Council resolution, which would also call for setting a timeline for an Israeli withdrawal to the pre-1967 borders. Egyptian Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry said that an agreement was reached wherein the Arab ministers asked a team of experts to start working on preparing a plan to assist the Palestinians in their effort to seek a UN resolution calling for establishing a timeline concerning an Israeli withdrawal to the pre-1967 borders. Abbas made a trip to Russia to speak with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov about the matter and to get advice on how Russia can support the effort to recognize a Palestinian state at the UN Security Council. In response, Putin said that Russia will support the Palestinian effort. Speaking at an Arab League summit, Putin said that the Palestinians have a right to establish an independent and viable state with East Jerusalem as its capital. A Chinese envoy to the United Nations called on the Palestinians and Israel to move toward each other and restart their peace talks as soon as possible. China's representative to the United Nations, Wang Min, said, "The recent situation in the Middle East remains volatile. Solving the question of Palestine and Israel is becoming more important and more urgent. The creation of an independent state of Palestine through peace talks and the peaceful coexistence of the two countries is the only way out," he said, adding, "We hope that Israel will demonstrate goodwill and sincerity, stop the construction of settlements, and lift completely the blockade on Gaza." He added that any solution to the conflict should consider Israel's legitimate security concerns. China firmly supports the people of Palestine in their just cause for the restoration of their legitimate national rights, said Wang. China has always supported Palestine and Israel living in peace and security. We are open to all initiatives that will contribute to the restart of peace talks. China will continue its effort to find a solution to the question of Palestine, he said. Meanwhile, France urged the United Nations Security Council to set a framework to broker peace between Israel and the Palestinians as council member New Zealand said it had started working on a draft resolution to kickstart the peace process. New Zealand's UN Ambassador Jim McLeay said, "We have been working on a text that might serve the purpose of getting negotiations between Israel and the Palestinians started again." French UN Ambassador François Delattre said, "It's the responsibility of this council to adopt a consensual and balanced resolution that sets the parameters of a final status and a timeline for negotiations." France and New Zealand indicated that now was the right time for the UN Security Council to consider this matter since Israel held its elections last month and before the U.S. presidential campaign gets started in early 2016. McLeay said that New Zealand was prepared to see how the French-led push for a UN resolution played out first, saying, "We have not seen the latest French text, but it has a chance of succeeding. New Zealand stands ready to engage and to be helpful in this process." The French ambassador to the United Nations said that the establishment of a Palestinian state is in the interest of Middle Eastern stability, stressing that without a Palestinian state, there will never be peace in the region. He said, "We are convinced more than ever that there is no alternative to the establishment of a Palestinian state, which is in the interest of everyone and in the interest of peace. So it is essential that the UN Security Council maintains its responsibility toward this end." The French ambassador said that the Israeli settlements are illegal and undermine the possibility of a Palestinian state existing on the ground. He stressed the need for all parties to commit to the two-state solution and to proceed from here to create a new political perspective that leads to the establishment of a Palestinian state alongside Israel, and to face the continued unilateral strategies which only increase the lack of trust between the parties. Finally, he said that we cannot surrender and we cannot accept the current situation, which will inevitably lead to a disaster. France wants to have a leading role in promoting a UN Security Council resolution in favor of Palestinian statehood. France discussed the possibility of presenting its own resolution at the end of 2014. A possible French resolution will probably include a demand for a border based on 1967 lines with mutually agreed land swaps. Additional parameters will be security and arrangements on the borders, including the presence of international forces, Jerusalem as a shared capital for the two states, and a just and agreed upon solution to the Palestinian refugee problem. The French hope to convince the Obama administration to not cast a veto on such a resolution. A French foreign ministry source was cautiously optimistic that the United States may abstain from such a vote. France believes that it needs to coordinate its policy with Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jordan. As a result, France wants to make the 2002 Saudi Peace Initiative the basis for its peace efforts. The Saudi Peace Initiative calls for an Israeli withdrawal from the Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, and the establishment of a Palestinian state in exchange for recognition of and normalization of ties with Israel by the Arab nations. Israel rejected the initiative outright at the time it was proposed, particularly because of the clause which calls for a just solution for Palestinian refugees, and in essence supports the Palestinian right of return. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas expressed at the time of its release full support for the Saudi Peace Initiative. According to diplomatic sources at the United Nations, the United States may support the Saudi Peace Initiative as a solution to solve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. These sources indicate that the U.S. would not initiate the move by itself, but would make sure that another Western state would introduce the move. The purported U.S. plan does not indicate that the United States supports all the clauses of the Saudi Peace Initiative or agrees to its diplomatic goals. However, the United States sees a benefit for supporting the 2002 Saudi peace initiative for two reasons. Number one, it will appease the Saudis who oppose the emerging nuclear deal that the United States is negotiating with Iran. Number two, it will send a message to the new government of Israel that it does not have a lot of time to ponder a renewal of negotiations with the Palestinians. France is hoping to avoid a U.S. veto at the United Nations. Because of increasing American frustration with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a French official described a possible backdoor for negotiations now and said, all countries, including the United States, now realizes that all other ways to achieve a peace agreement has been explored without success. The French are optimistic that the United States might reconsider its position because after Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's election win on March the 17th, where he made tough campaign comments about Palestinian statehood, the United States said it would reevaluate its approach to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The French official praised the pretty clear message sent by the Americans. French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius said, if we want to have a viable two-state solution, the UN Security Council must agree on a resolution. Therefore, I hope that the partners who were reluctant in the past, meaning the United States, will not be so reluctant in the future. U.S. President Barack Obama has said that he will reassess U.S. policy toward Israel following Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's comment before last month's Israeli elections that he would not allow the establishment of a Palestinian state during his administration. This could be a possible sign that the United States will no longer veto a UN Security Council resolution to recognize a Palestinian state at the United Nations. The French proposal includes a requirement for Palestinian recognition of Israel as a Jewish state. In the past, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has rejected this demand. The discussed French plan would consist of three steps. Number one, French diplomats will present a draft resolution to the UN Security Council. This requires that the United States will not veto such a resolution. Step number two, an international peace conference will be held. Step three, France, along with other European allies, will recognize an independent Palestinian state based upon 1967 borders. Nabil Sha'ath, a senior official of the Fatah Central Committee, said that France is working with the United States to gain backing for the new peace effort. France is also seeking support from European and Arab partners. He said that the weight of a UN Security Council resolution, which is legally binding, would add to international pressure against Israel. He declined to provide more details on the possible sticking points in any negotiations. Britain's UN ambassador, Mark Grant, said that Britain saw merit in a new UN Security Council resolution that sets the parameters for a peaceful and negotiated solution. However, in order for this to succeed, he said that this will require proper consultation on the issue with key UN Security Council members to achieve the full backing of the 15-member UN Security Council. Senior officials in the Obama administration are initiating steps to be taken immediately after the swearing in of the new Israeli government aimed at renewing Israeli and Palestinian peace talks. Furthermore, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, said that the United States would not rule out advancing resolutions targeting Israel. She noted that the United States had, as recently as last summer's war between Israel and Hamas, contemplated advancing a UN Security Council resolution on the conflict. U.S. Representative Nita Lowey, a Democrat from New York, told Power that she was troubled by reports suggesting a re-evaluation of our long-standing policy of defending Israel at the United Nations. Furthermore, U.S. Speaker of the House John Boehner described the Obama administration's historical treatment of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as reprehensible. Well, that's going to conclude this week's report, where we shared with you details regarding the current efforts by various nations to draft a UN Security Council resolution that would ultimately recognize a Palestinian state. Until we do it again, Shalom in Yeshua the Messiah. Amen.